the Fire Nation comes to invade, and Kaya ultimately dies, and it leaves Hakoda, Sokka and Katara's father, to take those two of them and venture off to maybe a better stronghold, which is the Northern Water Temple. Was Katara meant to be the Avatar? That's the big question surrounding today's episode of CBR Saga, aka the Cabbage Merchant's favorite podcast on the internet. We all know that Aang was frozen in ice for 100 years while the Fire Nation declared war. But what would have happened if Aang lived a natural life? Would he have defeated the Fire Nation in his time? Or would it fall to the next Avatar to take up the good fight? The way the timeline works out, I think there's enough evidence to say it's at least a possibility that Katara would have been the next Avatar. So let's have some fun today and talk about what that would have looked like, who Katara's team Avatar would consist of, and how she could have continued Aang's legacy. I'm joined today by my good friend Nick. Nick, how you doing today?
Doing good, Jacoby. Very excited.
I am too, because I love Avatar. I love talking about all things Avatar, and I love talking about these wild scenarios, that we can discuss. But my first question for you, which I think is a very defining question for everybody.
Sure.
If you could pick a bending style to have in today's world, which would you have?
I mean, I think there are better choices, but ever since I was a kid, the answer has been an earthbender. I like the solidity, the sort of strength in earthbending, plus I could use it to get around faster.
Good answer, but I think you're wrong. No, okay, I guess that's a valid answer. A lot of people, do like that, and I think there's merit there definitely for earthbending being a very valuable one. I personally would love to be an airbender. I would love to fly, and I would think in today's world, I could hide my abilities much better, if I was an airbender than if I was creating rocks or fire or water everywhere.
True, but make a house out of air, Jacoby. That's all I'm saying.
I guess I'm going to live on a cloud, Nick. You watch me. All right, so let's kind of dive into the topic today, and we're going to be talking about the possibility that Katara could have been the Avatar, and we like to deal with this kind of alternate timeline thing, and first and foremost, that starts with Aang. The pivotal moment, of course, in Avatar is Aang being frozen in ice for 100 years. So, kind of for this timeline that we're going to talk about, let's pretend that didn't happen. Let's pretend that Aang was actually there and didn't run away back, 100 years ago, right before the Fire Nation attacked, and kind of talk about how that would have unfolded a little bit, because as we know, the Fire Nation attacked and wiped out the air nomads completely, using the power of the comets to kind of take over. And I think it actually would have been very interesting if Aang was actually there for that fight and was fighting alongside his mentor Monk Gyatso and was able to kind of defend himself, because even though Aang had not mastered the Avatar state, we at least saw that he could enter it at a young age and unleash the power of the Avatar. So I think if he was actually there at his air temple when the Fire Nation attacked, I think that could have gone differently. I think a lot of air nomads would have been wiped out, and there would have been significantly less of them going forward, but at least I think that he would have stood a chance to at least get away. What do you think?
No, I agree, and the reason I agree is because when he is, in the regular timeline, when he is eventually brought out of the ice, he masters the elements and the Avatar state in a very short amount of time. So I don't necessarily know what the amount of time would have been between Monk Gyatso telling him he's the Avatar, and then if he decided to stay instead of run away, would he have had the same amount of time? Because clearly he didn't need as much time as other Avatars. So there is a real possibility that the events we see in the show Avatar could have happened over the same time span just 100 years ago. So the comet would have given him power over fire the same way it did to the Fire Nation. So having Aang in that fight, when he stops Ozai on his own, he very well could have done the same thing to Sozin.
Absolutely, and I think even Monk Gyatso, died in the original timeline, but I would like to think that in this new version, if Aang was there, they would have found a way to get away, and Aang could have at least trained with Monk Gyatso, even more so to master airbending even more, and Monk Gyatso would have hopefully have had some connections in the outside world to kind of do what they would normally do and train the Avatar, and he's skilled. Yes, it would have put Aang in a situation where he had to probably confront the Firelord much earlier than he would have wished.
Sure.
But I still think Aang could have handled it. And maybe the Fire Nation at this point is like, oh crap, the Avatar is gaining in power and we're not coming any closer to conquering it. The Avatar is probably going to beat us. And that's why I would like to think that Sozin was like, okay, we might lose our first attack. We might lose this battle, but we can still win the ultimate war. And that's by kind of conceding the fact that Aang is going to be powerful. Aang is going to keep fighting, and Aang is going to eventually defeat us. So let's maybe lie low a little bit and see how things unfold. I think Sozin is that smart to kind of plan that, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. His whole family, I think, are long game sort of people. Like, they'll give up the battle to win the war. And yes, having Aang around would change a lot. I would even shorten the timeline you said, because I don't think he would need Monkey Yaso to train him further. When he's broken out of the ice in the regular timeline, he's already mastered airbending. He certainly doesn't have a teacher. There's no more airbenders. So basically, the point in time that we're sort of changing, where like instead of deciding to run away, he decides to stay and become the Avatar. He's already got airbending down. So now he just needs Monkey Yaso to connect him to the other people that will teach him the other elements. So I think it's very likely that Aang learns the elements in the same amount of time, stops the battle, as it were, sort of saves the air nomads from going extinct, essentially, and then has them as allies later on. But I agree that having them as allies later on would be important, because Sozin wouldn't just concede. He would fight, and then if he doesn't see a way out, he would sit back and wait.
Yeah, because as of right now, how the timeline, I believe, works out is that Sozin dies about 20 years after their first attack, and that's when Firelord Azulon takes over and kind of continues that Firelord fight. I think 20 years in that gap is enough time for Sozin to be like, okay, let's, I'm going to tell my son Azulon, just like, let's play the long game here. We've lost this, but be better than me, rise up and wait for your chance. Wait for this Avatar to die in order to kind of start over, and we can try again, because, the Fire Nation will live on with this family forever. And I like that sort of long-term plotting, because that shows a real evilness when you can plot long-term, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. If there were ever a time to attack, it would be when the one person who can stop you is between the ages of like 1 and 12. So yes, if Aang got to the point of sort of being able to stop them, it would be very smart to wait it out to the point where the next person is at a more vulnerable time.
Exactly. So that kind of sets the stage for where we're at in this like alternate future, is that like the Fire Nation seems peaceful, they're shaking hands with everybody, they might be a little tense, but they still attend all the worldwide events and they play nice for now, but secretly they're plotting a second takeover. And I love Aang a lot as a character, because I think his optimism and the way that he views the world is what you need for an Avatar. Aang will always believe the best in people. So I think although Aang would make a great Avatar, and I think he would do a lot for the world around him, I think he would miss the fact that the Fire Nation is saying they're sorry, but actually not believing it. And that would lead into the fact that after he dies at his ripe old age, the Avatar would reincarnate to the next person, and it would be a Water Tribe individual. And I think that's why it's perfect that it would be Katara, because I just think that's the natural cycle of things. Katara, from what we saw, proved herself to be an amazing waterbender. Like she was the bee's knees, she was so great. And I think it would make sense for the Avatar cycle to continue on with her. What do you think? Do you think Katara has the merits to be a good Avatar?
Well, she certainly is the bee's knees. I will give you that. But yes, if there's one thing about Katara, it's that Avatar or not, she is her, like, if we're going to deal with destiny, Katara's destiny has always been for great things, because even when she's not the Avatar, she is like the right-hand person to the Avatar and helps him succeed. She's also, as you said, a fantastic waterbender. Like Aang with airbending, post being stuck in ice, Katara didn't really have a teacher. She became one of the best waterbenders by teaching herself, which is such a mind-blowing feat when you think about everything in consideration. So I think it's very possible, very plausible, especially if we're sort of in a time where, Sozin's playing the long game, but maybe they still get rid of a lot of Water Nation people, because outside of the Air Nation in the regular timeline, obviously, Water Nation's pretty small. There's not a whole lot of options. So Katara is definitely a prime candidate if Aang lives to that perfect age and dies at the right time.
Exactly, because like the way I see it is like how it would unfold is kind of like this. They kind of sense Aang is on his way out. Aang's old, he's accomplished all that he wants to accomplish, and the Fire Nation's like, okay, this is our chance. So they start doing making little moves, just slightly, like maybe invade some Earth islands just to expand a little bit, and everyone's like, hey, don't do that. And they're like, okay, sorry. But then they continue to build out their empire, and as you said, kind of attacking maybe more Water Nation tribes, because they know that the next Avatar is going to be from the Water Nation, so they're trying to hedge their bets. And when the Avatar is reincarnated to Katara, they try take two, because I believe destiny has a way of working itself out where kind of the same kind of similar things can happen. So we know that as of now, Katara's mother sacrificed herself to save her when she was a young child in the original timeline. And I would like to think something like that would happen again. So I imagine when the Fire Nation attacks and Katara is still either a baby or super young, the Fire Nation comes to invade, and Kaya ultimately dies, and it leaves Hakoda, Sokka and Katara's father, to take those two of them and venture off to maybe a better stronghold, which is the Northern Water Temple, which kind of sets up this journey of Katara needs to train. And the way that I see it is that if she's taken as a young child to the Northern Water Temple, she can stay there for years and kind of build up her skills and get ready for the war that's happening in the outside world, because the Northern Water Temple is was very secure for a bit. And let's pretend for this alternate timeline, it's maybe a little bit more secured where she can actually stay behind those walls. But then there eventually comes a point where she has to venture out, right? She has to train. So it would be, I think that's a good setup for an Avatar show for Avatar Katara, right?
Totally. And you talk about destiny. The same thing would probably happen with her and her mother, because the Fire Nation knows Aang just died. The next Avatar is going to be born into the Water Tribe. They would go looking at the South Pole again and say, where's the waterbender? She's probably not like, because in the regular timeline, they're just trying to get rid of all waterbenders. But in this new timeline, now they're looking for the Avatar. And so, yeah, it could really work out the way you're pitching it.
And then I think then that kind of leads us into like the really fun stuff. So it's like, say Katara's, like a teen, like how old she is in the original thing, which is, I believe, 14 years old. She has to go out, and maybe Hakoda is off fighting, like he tends to do. And so her and Sokka, maybe there's a breach in the Northern Water Temple like there is in the original show, and it forces them to go out and find teachers and start their training and have a very similar adventure. She needs her own team avatar, and I think there's some great options to fill those slots. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about who could be Katara's team avatar in a sense.
Sure. Well, let's start with Earth, I guess. Yeah, so I would think Earth would be the first stop. Toph would still be around, theoretically, if she crosses paths with Toph, who has proven herself to be like the greatest Earthbender. That's certainly a viable option.
I was just saying, because you just made me think, when you say Toph, that's great, because I would love to see their interaction. They had such an interesting interaction, like on the original show, by being both teachers, but it would be a completely different dynamic if Toph has to teach Katara. That's all I was going to say. It's just like, that would be amazing.
Oh, absolutely, because they would sort of encounter the same issues, because Katara as a teacher is obviously opposite style of Toph. So I would imagine Katara's learning style would really clash with Toph's as well. So we would get that same sort of thing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, the other Earthbender I was going to mention would be Bumi, but I don't know if Bumi would do it for the same reasons he sort of sends Aang on his way to someone else. Like maybe Bumi would know if he's the right person for Katara or not.
That's true. And if Bumi, was super kind of hesitant on teaching Aang right away, given their close relationship, it stands to reason that he would probably be even less hesitant to teach, Katara. Totally. So that would be tough. So I think Toph is the better option, and I just love the situation that kind of sets up. So that's Earth. Mm-hmm. My opinion for airbending is Tenzin, who is Aang's son in the new show. Of course, it's not the same Tenzin that we know from Legend of Korra, because obviously in that timeline, Katara and Aang are together and they have a son named Tenzin. But right. I would still think that Aang would get married in his life, and obviously it would not be with Katara, but it would be with somebody else. I don't know. I would imagine at that point he would get married to another air nomad, just probably to continue on the airbending legacy, and they would still have a son named Tenzin. So in my mind, just so I can see the show, and in my mind, it's still an adult Tenzin who's voiced by J.K. Simmons. And I don't even care if that timeline doesn't really work out or the logics of that make it look weird. I just want to see J.K. Simmons as an airbending teacher again, in whatever show and whatever he wants to be in.
Sure. No, that sounds great. But honestly, like realistically thinking about it, there's not a whole lot of options, because from the timeline we know, there's no other really airbenders to point to. The only thing I can think of is, wouldn't it be kind of cool if like maybe Monk Gyatso had this like air that we didn't know about in terms of like air nomads, but living in this timeline where Aang has sort of stopped the extinction of air nomads and Monk Gyatso, maybe he has this powerful grandson that Katara comes along and he can be like, my grandfather taught the last Avatar, and that would be sort of a cool connection.
Oh, I love that, because they do like to say that friendships know no bounds. That's what happened when it was revealed that Avatar Roku was friends with Monk Gyatso growing, and it says like friendship transcends all those things, and that would be a fun connection, and I actually do like that idea a lot. So sorry, J.K. Simmons, you're out. Like it's
well, J.K. Simmons could still voice him. No?
Oh, that's true. I was in a very one track. J.K. Simmons can only voice Tenzin, but I guess this is an alternate reality. Anything can happen here, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that kind of fills out a good solid part of the team. Now I think we get into what I think is probably one of the most interesting elements. It's the firebender. Katara is going to need a firebending teacher. And that's why I think Zuko would fill that role kind of perfectly, because I would imagine that he's going through his same sort of conflicted character arc that he does in the original show. And now this time, maybe he comes around to it a little bit sooner, given that the weird timey-wimey sort of shenanigans that happen on, and he just knows that he wants to train the Avatar and realize that, hey, my family plotted a war for 100 years. They're not the good guys here, and want to train the Avatar. And I think that would be perfect, right? I mean, like, I can't think of anyone better than Zuko.
I agree. To an extent. I'm going to pitch something real crazy here.
Okay.
And I mean real crazy. So we're pitching this thing where Aang is alive, right? Aang is alive during this whole time when the Fire Nation rises up. What if, let's say it skips a generation. What if Sozin, in retreating from war, means that his son Azulan is no longer going to fill his shoes? What if Sozin says, we're going to wait? The same sort of way in Star Wars, how like, it skips a generation. Like Kylo Ren goes, I will finish what my grandfather started because my father is like a good person, or my mother is a good person.
Ooh.
What if it skips a generation? Maybe Aang becomes friends with Azulan the same way he became friends with Zuko when he was stuck in the ice. And then we get sort of different dynamics within the regime of the Fire Nation. Maybe Azula does not become this crazy person because she does not have like her grandfather pushing these things down, whereas her father maybe takes more of a liking to Zuko now that he didn't have a father figure that he sort of agreed with of his own. Maybe Iroh has more of an effect on Azula in this timeline now that we're saying. So what we know about Zuko, it certainly makes the most sense. But if we're pitching this whole warped timeline where a bunch of different things happen, I could certainly see one or two things going differently in that lineage that would make Azula want to be an ally of Katara.
Ooh, so Azula's the ally and Zuko is more of the bad guy in this crazy alternate timeline.
I think it's very possible.
Ah, gosh. I love that so much. I was so excited. I was getting ready to explain this is finally the chance for Zuko and Katara to get together like they rightfully should have in the beginning because they're two kindred souls, and I had all that locked and loaded. But then you go and pitch that, and I think I want to see that more. I do want to see what Zuko could have been, right? Because if we know the original show and then we get to see this alternate timeline, it's like that makes it even better, right? To like see Zuko give into his dark impulses and see how bad he could have been. And it would be great to see Azula as an ultimate good person. Maybe she's not a full-on good person, but like maybe she's like, you know, she's still snide, she's still manipulative, but she ultimately wants to do good. And then you have this awesome team of Monk Gyatso's, you know, grandchild, voiced by J.K. Simmons. You have Toph, you have Azula, and you have Katara all fighting like on the same team. That sounds so epic.
Yeah, I could see it. But I do want to hear about Katara and Zuko, because that is definitely something I pictured in the show. I was like, they would kind of make a good couple.
Right, just because I just thought that they came from very similar backgrounds, both with losing their mothers, and they just never got a chance to fully explore their relationship because Aang was in the way there, you know, and it took Zuko a while to kind of turn good, and he was too obsessed with finding his honor to really focus on Katara and all that stuff. But dang it, I like your idea better.
Yeah. The one last thing I will say is you could do that with like Zuko and Katara having this relationship, and then you could make like Zuko's ex-girlfriend Mai like a lead villain in the series. Like you could have Ty Lee come back. I think the dynamics would be really interesting if you sort of break Zuko and Mai up and have him be with Katara, and then see what that does to the rest of the people surrounding Zuko.
Man, this is just writing itself up at this point. I mean, like I'm jotting all these notes down to pitch it to, you know,
M. Night Shyamalan. Give us a call.
Yeah, we're available. Yeah, because I like that idea more, because I think that would lead to a more cathartic ending, right? Of Katara eventually taking on this evil Zuko with her team by her side. I think that would just be a more fitting ending, and it would be very similar, because I think you could actually kind of play it the same way, where both Katara still loses her mom and Zuko still maybe loses his mom in some fashion, and that creates this hero and this villain who are very similar to each other and ultimately, you know, have to fight one another. And I think that's what makes the most interesting stories overall. So I'm sorry, Aang. I think Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of the greatest cartoons of all time, if not the greatest television shows of all time. But hearing what we just pitched, I mean, I think this could give it a run for its money.
Absolutely, I agree.
So I think that about does it. We definitely had some fun today talking about this crazy alternate timeline of Avatar. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you, Nick, for joining me. And we'll be back next time, just as soon as we help the cabbage merchants, pick up all these cabbages that we knocked down in our excitement. So thank you all very much. See you next time.